Madam President, we've heard our colleagues talking about jobs, and clearly that needs to be the #1 priority in the country today, and it needs to be domestic jobs. The private sector is not doing just fine. The answer to the problems we face is not more government jobs, it's more private sector jobs, and the numbers aren't good anywhere you look, any way you look. In fact, if you look at the last 3 months in the country, more people signed up for disability than new jobs were created. More people signed up for disability than new jobs were created. More people decided they were going to opt out and perhaps of the workforce because of disability reasons than people that got jobs. And we're here talking about things that have minimal impact on the economy when we could be talking about things that have lots of impact on the economy. Good energy policy, good tax policy, good regulatory policy. As long as this uncertainty continues, or as long as there's substantial certainty that all of those things are going to begin to work against job creators, people aren't going to create jobs. We've talked this week, we voted twice on something called the Disclose Act that had absolutely no chance of becoming law this year, and everybody on this floor knew it. What we ought to be disclosing is what our budget would look like. The Senate hasn't had a budget in 3 years, and the law already requires that. The law already requires a significant disclosure on the part of the Senate, and that's disclosing how we're going to spend the money. And the Senate of the United States, for the first time in the history of the Budget Control Act 3 years ago, the second time 2 years ago, the third time this year, has decided we're just not going to obey the law. And when one of the leaders was asked, why aren't you having a budget, he said, well, we'd be politically foolish to say what we're for. Now, what kind of responsible position is that? The other way we could disclose things is we could have the appropriations bills on the floor. The House has a budget. The House has passed half of the appropriations bills already. We haven't had a single bill on the floor, and the majority leader announced last week that we wouldn't have an appropriations bill on the floor before the election. Now, why is it that we don't want to say before the election what we're for? Why is it we don't want to say before the election how we're going to spend the people's money? Why is it we don't want to say before the election what the budget would be, or even before the last election, the Senate wouldn't say what the budget would be, and so we don't have one. When you don't have a plan, you plan to fail, and clearly the economy is doing just exactly that. Statistic after statistic are not what the American people would want them to be. Housing prices are down, unemployment's up, the labor group, the people that want to be in the economy, is at a 30-year low. If you had the same number of people looking for jobs who were looking for jobs and had jobs in January of 2009, the unemployment rate would be over 11%. The only reason the unemployment rate is 8.2% is so many people have given up on the economy. Nobody thinks we have fewer working-age people than we had when Ronald Reagan was president, but the labor force that we're counting is smaller than any time since Ronald Reagan was president. There must be some big problem, Madam President, or people would be out looking for jobs, people would be out finding jobs, people would want to be part of an economy that they see is faltering, and we're talking about little things instead of big things, while the big things that affect America are dramatically affecting American families and American job creators. And the president is telling small businesses that if your business was successful, it wasn't because of you. It was because of all kinds of other factors that you just happened to take advantage of. No small business person in America believes that. Nobody who ever opened the door to a business the first day, put their phone number in the phone book the first day and said, call me, I can provide these services for you, thinks that they weren't successful because of their work. I'd like to turn to my friend from Mississippi, Mr. Wicker, to talk on these issues as well. And there are so many things we could be talking about today, but clearly jobs in the economy are critical to American families. The attack on small business, the idea that the private sector is doing fine, that We just need more government jobs. I just don't find anybody in America that believes that's the reality of the world we live in today. The reluctance of the Senate to take votes. Mr. Wicker, who served in the House of Representatives with Mr. Isakson and I, said we should have amendments. We should take votes. Madam President, we should say what we're for. And we shouldn't wait until after the election to say what we're for. The reports that are out are consistent with the president's view in 2010 when he said we shouldn't do anything to change tax policy because the economy was struggling. By any measure of the economy, it's struggling more now than it was in 2010. Growth in the economy is about half what it was when the president said, with this kind of economy, we shouldn't raise taxes. And so he agreed to extend the current tax policies for 2 more years. But the minute we did that, we made exactly the same mistake we'd made the previous 2 years, which was we created a big question mark out there for the American people as to what tax policies were going to be. We already have the tax increases with the president's health care plan, and it raises the top rate to about 43%. Just the top rate goes up automatically with the president's health care plan to about 43%. If we go back to the old 39 rate, then we add the president's taxes in. We put an extraordinary tax on working families who, for whatever reason, decide that they're not going to participate in the insurance system. The mandate, the tax on that would fall heavily. 50% of all of that tax comes from families of 4, the families that make less than $72,000. Between $24,000 and $72,000 for families of 4, we've decided we're going to penalize them with a tax if you voted for the president's health care plan. What are we thinking here? And why are we ignoring all of the warnings? Last month, the Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, gave a rare warning that if we let the defense sequestration and go into effect and return to the tax policies of 2000, that we will be in a recession, that we'll see a 4% decline in growth in an economy, as I said earlier, that has more people signing up for disability than new jobs being created. Already the case, and we'd want to take another 4% out of that economy. The Ernst & Young report that my friend from Utah mentioned said that if we drive over this fiscal cliff, that one of the Senate majority leaders said this week at the Brookings Institute, the majority's prepared to drive over, that we'd lose 700,000 jobs, we'd shrink the economy by 1.3%, we'd reduce investment by 2.5%, we'd cut wages by 2%. And this is in a country where middle-class incomes have already dropped by $4,350 since the president took office. Why would we be looking for another time to cut wages? Why would we think that this is a better time to slow the economy down than the end of 2010? Chairman Bernanke from the Federal Reserve was here yesterday and said that we're being held back because there's so much uncertainty. We're being held back because people aren't making the investments. They're not taking the risk that Senator Wicker talked about. And I'd like to go back to Senator Lee and talk a little more about his ideas on taxes. Whenever you don't reward risk, Senator Lee, people don't take risk. And if they don't take risk, they don't create opportunity for others. And if we look at putting this tax on small businesses, if we putting this tax on people that otherwise might take a chance with some of their investments, we're just not going to have the risk reward system work the way it needs to work. If you don't want people to take risk, don't reward risk. You know, government has traditionally taxed the things it wanted to discourage and subsidized the things it wanted to encourage. We appear to be subsidizing a lot of things like Solyndra that don't work and taxing a lot of things that might work by constantly talking about not only today's taxes, But the likelihood that if the current majority has its way and the president has his way, that the current tax policies will dramatically go up. In fact, they're guaranteed to go up from the current rate, even if we stayed at the current rate, because of all of the health care taxes. And now, Senator Lee, we'd also say we want to go back to a death tax that goes back to almost to $1 million exemption. If you're a small business or a family farm, many family farms, if you just calculate the value of your farm equipment, you're suddenly at the edge of that number that sounds so big until you realize you'd have to sell the farm to pay the tax. Or if you have the business that you're trying to pass along, maybe to the very people who stood by your side, your children and grandchildren, and helped you grow that business, and almost impossible to evaluate who created that growth. But when you pass away as the person that started the business, suddenly this big tax obligation falls to your family. And your proposal to eliminate the death tax would address that. The proposal that we're for on this side to continue current tax policies as we look toward an effort to have tax policies that make more sense. We've got the highest corporate rate in the world. We're seeing American companies say, well, we think we're going to incorporate in Great Britain. We're going to move our company, our headquarters, who we are to Great Britain because they have better tax policies. Who would have ever thought that Great Britain would have better tax policies than the United States of America? But they do today, as does every other European country. We have managed to get at the top of the list. And in return for those lower tax rates and a system that works internationally, let's eliminate a lot of the complexity of this tax code. We're for that. But let's not increase taxes while we're having that debate. Let's commit ourselves to that debate and not increase taxes, not move forward with all the new health care taxes and the taxes that apparently the majority says, well, we're prepared to raise taxes on the middle class because then they'll put so much pressure on Republicans in the Senate that we'll have to eliminate some of the current tax policies that impact small businesses and other individuals. And so, Senator Lee, you want to talk a little bit more about as we have now a couple of more minutes, I think, and you want to help as we think about how these tax policies really hold back opportunity for other people. If you don't reward risk, people don't take risk. If they don't take risk, they don't create opportunity. We don't have the jobs out there in the private sector that are clearly the key. That's